Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the Second Bite podcast. I am Todd Taskey, and today I am joined by my guest, Wesley Mathews from High Level Marketing. Wes, great to have you with us today.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to get into the transaction that you did in March of this year, 2021. I know we got a lot of good stuff to talk about there. Before we do, I want to have a quick shout out to our sponsor, which is, I don't know if you know these guys, Wes, they're in Miami. It's a private equity group called Trivest. And Trivest, man, they've been around like 30 some odd years. They've done over 300 transactions. They focus specifically on family-owned and founder-owned firms to grow those businesses. They've got a very traditional private equity fund. They also have a fund called their Discovery Fund that focuses on companies that are $1 million of EBITDA that want to be a platform. So they'll work with a small company and help them grow that business with the same amount of resources that they grow with a larger one. They also have a really cool fund, a third fund, that will invest a minority position into a larger business. So those guys have been around. They're always on the Inc. list of best private equity groups and founder-friendly private equity groups and on and on. So trivest.com is their website. You can get additional support material for listeners of the podcast if you go to trivest.com/secondbite. Really good group. Happy with them, and all my interactions with them have always been great. So thanks to the people at Trivest for sponsoring us and being with us. With that out of the way, Wes, let's talk about you. I want to get into the transaction that you did with Bell Media back, I think it was March or April 1st. But before we jump in, you're the founder, CEO of Higher Level Marketing. Tell me what the company does and who you do it for.
Yeah, so High Level Marketing created the company, co-founded it in 2009, and we are a website design development SEO company for small to mid-size entrepreneurial run organizations. So specifically around service companies, plumbers, roofers, electricians, and healthcare and franchises. So, when you think about local SEO or local optimization, if a plumber's in your area, we can target a 10 to 15 mile radius and really make sure that they're ranked naturally through search. And we build them a phenomenal website for little to no involvement on their end. So obviously there's a million web companies out there, a million SEO companies. We pride ourselves in making sure that we have the highest quality SEO and team and web out there. And we've been doing that now since 2009. So it's been great.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with it. Tell me, before the transaction, give me an idea of how big the company was in terms of revenue, in terms of people, that type of thing.
Yeah, so at time of transaction, we were at about 45 employees, and in 2020, we did $6.5 million in revenue. That's straight revenue. That's not like third-party advertising revenue. Anything that we sent off to Google or other sources, that was outside of that revenue. So, we grew up pretty good up until that point.
Yeah, it's a nice accomplishment. And the company was profitable, obviously, nicely profitable along the way.
Yep.
So you did this transaction in March 2021. What do you think was, for you, the most memorable part of the transaction?
It's kind of interesting. I mean, thinking back, reflection's always kind of interesting, but thinking back, I was probably getting private equity or emails every day through COVID about somebody wanting to buy our organization. Half were bullshit, half were probably real. We did make it on the radar of a handful of, people, private equity. I remember getting your email and I remember kind of laughing because I just finished reading or watching Grant Cardone's 10X book or something. And I think I saw your picture, maybe scoped you out on LinkedIn, and you reminded me of him. And I was like, I'm going to take this call or take this email. And you and I started talking. And I just remember the start of it because it was such a holy shit, everything in my mind and my partner's mind, one day we knew we were going to exit or do, kind of the next thing. But that conversation in hindsight, that was the catalyst that started spinning this off into what we did. We closed the deal pretty quickly. So that was kind of memorable, just getting my mindset and just going through the whole process of just shifting gears, and then, it consumed my life for the next, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, mine too. So, so peel that back just a little bit. I will, and then get your comments. So, I have a lot of conversations every week with entrepreneurs and also with private equity groups, and so there was a group in Alabama called Bell Media that I knew. We worked with them to see, and by the way, Scott Bell was on the podcast a few months ago. Very interesting. You can get a little bit from his perspective as well for any of the listeners that want to look that up, Scott Bell. But when I talked to Scott, we were working with a private equity group that wanted to acquire them. Couldn't quite make that deal work. And one of the things that they always asked is, all right, so, you guys, even at 6.5 million, if you're running at a 20% margin, that's $1.3 million, $1.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
Bell is slightly larger, but not a lot larger, right? So private equity would love to be over 3 million of EBITDA because it helps with financing and the rest. So I remember thinking to Scott, I said, geez, man, there's a group, you're down here in Alabama, there's a group up in Detroit. I like Wes a lot, but they've got a really good business. They've got great technology, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. They have great technology. They have good sales. They just got one guy, right? They don't have a real sales team. And Bell had a great sales team and lacking the technology and the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had reached out to you, it was sometimes we work with a client that says, hey, let's go scour the market and find a deal. Sometimes we will reach out and say, hey, I got a really interesting idea. Do you want to explore it? Right? And you were open to that idea of let's exploring it. And I think we first started with a conversation, obviously, with Scott. Do you remember anything about that kind of triggered in your mind? Maybe this would work. Maybe we can get what we wanted.
Yeah, right away. So I remember giving you, because we had our conversation, I think I professionally told you to kind of like kick rocks, like, here's this crazy number, like, don't talk to me unless, here's this north number. And I remember we ended that in a good tone. And then you called me back like 2 weeks later and said, hey, like, there's this guy I'd like you to meet. And I'm like, okay. I remember talking to Scott. I remember looking at Scott and I'm like, again, rewind a little bit. I'm an entrepreneur. I started high level marketing. There's a lot of self doubt. One of my challenges was being critical on myself of not being able to grow the company further than 6.5. So I'm constantly looking in the mirror saying, am I the right CEO for this organization? So I see Scott, this guy's super buttoned up, and I'm like, holy shit, he looks like, this is before we even started talking. I'm like, he looks like he could be the CEO of a digital marketing company. So as we start to talk, super analytical, super precise. Look, I'm a visionary entrepreneur. I'm a builder. I'm not this buttoned up analytical CNBC type CEO. So as we're having these conversations, I'm learning a little bit about him and the company and learning a little bit about us. And that was some of the big holes within Bell Media is, I'm not going to say they didn't have a technology division, but what they lacked was easy for high level marketing. Like my partner, John, founding partner, CTO, like phenomenal technology. We had that on lock. And what Scott talked about was how they built this sales intake process, of which I spent the last 6 months figuring out how to create and how much it was going to cost me. So I've already done the due diligence on this. It was going to cost about 1.5 million to execute this properly. And here I'm talking to Scott, who's already thought this through, and they've been doing it for 2 years. So, and they had a COO and like everything. So I looked at myself as, kind of a visionary entrepreneur, CEO, my partner, CTO. They have a CEO, which is Scott, and they have a COO, whom I later met, Nathan, who's an amazing COO. So as I'm talking to Scott, like I build mental models in my head, and I kind of knew from that phone call, like this has legs. We could come together. And if I rewind back, I never wanted to like 100% sell high level marketing. Hence the name of your podcast, Second Bite. I challenged myself in terms of what I was able to do to grow it myself. Cause, from 2009 to 2020, 11 years, I thought I would have grown the company bigger, faster, and, hooking on to a synergistic partner like these guys with their ambition. Look, the people and the team you're with is going to determine how fast and how far you go. And I really saw with these guys, like, man, they're hungry, they're motivated. And I haven't seen that in a long time. Like, it's lonely at the top. I'm running HLM as CEO. My CTO partner's a little burnt out. We were having some challenges with our COO. COVID's going on. All these outside pressures, and it was refreshing to me to see these guys. And I'm like, holy cow! Like, if we roll this up into one, we now become, we're not like the biggest agency in North America, but we're not a boutique shop either. We're in the middle. And I like being in the middle because you can go to the top, you can move really, really quickly. And, that was probably the first meet. I remember getting off that call and I told my wife, I said, this, this deal's going to go. I'm like, I like these guys. There's no way they didn't like me because they've
Yeah.
never probably experienced anything like
Not
that.
even reasonable. Right.
And I was thinking the whole time, like, HLM, high level marketing, we have some amazing people in technology and what we do. We've just been so focused on what we do and how we do it. We really haven't gone to the top of the mountain and branded ourselves properly. And yeah, so that was the critical moment in this whole thing was
That's really,
that phone call.
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting and helpful to hear you, articulate the insecurity and the self-doubt that we all have, but as entrepreneurs, we push something else out front for people to see. But it one of the things I've always known about you is that you're really self-aware.
Mhm.
So I know you weren't thinking, hey, in 2021 we got to do a transaction, but you were aware of your personal weaknesses as CEO. And when you look at a high level and its weaknesses as an organization, you were aware of those. Do you think that's uncommon as you talk to other CEOs to be
Yeah,
that aware?
very. I think the only reason why I'm able to do that now, so I'm 40 years old. I started this business, 11 years ago. I joined EO, Entrepreneur Organization, which is basically, founders, entrepreneurs, owners of businesses that do over $1 million of revenue each year. So for me, joining that organization in 2014 allowed me to spend time with other like-minded entrepreneurs, and we bring in speakers and travel and just learning. It took me a long time to just realize this stuff and look in the mirror and say, yeah, like, ego aside, and just look, it got to a point where I want to build HLM into $100 million company. And I had to say, I'm doing the same thing at year over year, growing a little bit. Again, I'm not discounting our growth and I'm not appreciative and happy with what we did, but we're not going to get to the mountain based on how I'm doing it. So I need to take capital. Because we grew the company personally. Like, we had about 600,000 of debt, personal debt on the books at the time of transaction. That was for myself and my partner. We never took private equity. We never took anybody else's money. We bootstrapped this thing. And, just looking to the future, I mean, thankfully I had 6 to 7 years experience with EO and being part of an EO forum and, really allowing people to have honest conversations with my blinders and really feel comfortable with who I am. So yeah, for me, it was a growth thing. And if you asked me 8 years ago, Wes, I'd probably give you a different answer. But I'm
Of course.
definitely
Well, that shows maturity and growth. But let me ask you this. I talk to a lot of guys that are going to grow a sales team or build a sales team or add a salesperson. I have never had somebody say to build a sales organization is going to cost us X, let alone $1.5 million. Tell me what that exercise was like. Do you think that number is accurate? And knowing that and knowing that was going to come out of your pocket, did that help influence some of your decision to do a transaction?
yeah, because at the time, talking about the dollars and my confidence, I was really second guessing, like dig in my pocket or take that obligation on based on the team as we were that day. I didn't have the confidence. I had a lot of anxiety, and I just really didn't feel comfortable or confident the way that we were running our organization with the leaders and just how our organizational structure was. And maybe it was a little bit about me, like not having the gas to like, okay, I got to strap my boots up and just go again. I felt like, man, at some point, I'm Rambo in the jungle and I don't have anybody with me to help conquer this thing. Um, you know, our I do feel it would have cost anywhere from 1 to 1.5 because of the resources and the technology. And kind of fast forward today, we've taken their process and we've improved on it. We're still building technology around it. So even 10 months after the fact, we're still sort of doing it, but like now we're a much larger organization and we have a development team now of 6 people, where prior to the transaction, my development team was pretty much one guy, which was my partner.
Right.
Everybody else was doing client work. Now we built that into a 6-person team that's strictly R&D, and they're able to pick their head up and not be lost in client work and actually build on our technology. So I would say a lot, that to me was confidence and like, how the hell am I going to do this? And I don't know if I can stomach putting this much on the line. So again, looking across the aisle at Scott and Bell and Nathan in this deal, I'm like, man, it was just way more attractive to say, man, if we came together and did this, like our knowledge on I refer to it as HLM North and HLM South. That was kind of like the beginning, but like the knowledge and people we have in our technology and coming together with what HLM South and Alabama knew, and we can come together and make this thing awesome. Because again, part of the deal was it takes me out of any sort of fiduciary responsibility if this thing, burn the boats.
Right.
But before, like, look, I have 4 kids, I'm married, I want to stay that way. I love
Yeah.
my kid. Like, I wasn't ready to burn the boats by myself.
Yeah. That's
So
an analogy.
going to war with 4 now executives involved in the company, and now we've added an outside COO. I got
Mhm.
5 people that are ready to, like, where before, we were a skeleton crew. So
So let's talk a little bit about the transaction for a second.
yeah,
So, and I don't know how much of the specifics around the economics you want to share,
yeah,
but in terms of structure, it was 80% and you rolled forward for 20% in equity of
correct,
Yuka, right?
correct, correct.
And so you were roughly, let's say you're roughly what, 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 3,000,000, 4 in EBITDA
Yep.
times 6 or 7 ish. Because this is what's getting to my point. So if I'm making up numbers, let's just make math easy for me and say that's roughly $8,000,000. You have a partner, so you split it, you pay some
Yep.
fees, you pay some taxes. So you got a couple of $1,000,000, maybe a few $1,000,000. And a lot of people would say that's not life-changing money. I'd like to get your comment on how putting a chunk like that with 4 kids and being bootstrapped, how that has changed your life, if at all,
Yep.
and how you're excited about what's going to happen next for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things I learned being part of EO is like it's all about experience share, right? And it's all about what's good for me may not be good for you. So when I talk about this was architected in my mind for myself and my family. And it was very calculated. And ever since I was a young kid, I remember I got my first job when I was 13, and my mom's like, why are you getting a job at 13? You're going to work the rest of your life. And I said, I'm not. I'm not going to work the rest of my life. And so again, if you've ever been to Las Vegas, or like, I'm not a big gambler in that regard, you know, look, COVID happened, all these different things are happening. I've always had in the back of my mind, like, this could be gone tomorrow. Life has shown me that COVID, all these things, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So in my mind, I'm like, look, if we can pull enough off the table that can kind of satisfy us for where we've gotten to the company today, but then roll equity forward to really grow a meaningful organization with that opportunity. 10% of $100 million company is a lot better than 50% of a $10 million company. And that's exactly in my mind what was going to happen. We wouldn't have grown and scaled the company to where we're about to go. So in my mind, if I could take enough and put that aside, and I even told my wife specifically, she's like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And I said, I don't want I want enough money where, like, it's a good cushion, it's a runway, but like I don't want a crazy amount of money where then I don't have to do anything, if that makes sense. Some people might say, well, that's stupid, but I'm 40 years old. I want to stay hungry. I'm active, as an entrepreneur and still in HLM. So like it just kind of fit my life and the way I do things and just how we structured the deal and the move forward. Cause I mean, I could talk about the comp structure I have now and then just the revenue I'm making along the way. It's significant. So in hindsight, if I look back and say the money and revenue I made from HLM, it's about dollar to dollar equal, if not more now. And the opportunity is that much bigger. And again, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Like, I like to take risk. I like to go big. And designing that also took my partner into account. And that's really, what he wanted too. So it just, all the stars aligned. It made perfect sense. It was exciting and motivating. We still feel motivated and it's meaningful rolling in the new company that we're, big and, big partners in the organization. We have a C-level position in the organization as well to continue to drive it forward. So it just kind of worked out serendipitously.
Yeah. So your deal closed in March.
Hmm.
Um, and your second bite will still be somewhere down the road, right? Because you want to build
Yes.
it to the size you just described. Tell me, what it was like the week after, like transaction, and tell me what the couple biggest maybe changes or mental shifts have been for you since the deal's closed.
Yeah, it's the biggest one is looking at the organization now from a 30,000-foot view versus being so close to it and in the weeds. And this has really developed over the last 3 to 4 months. So a little bit about what I'm doing now. I'm no longer the CEO of the company. Scott
But
Bell is the CEO. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry. When the deal closed that next Monday, you were doing the exact same thing you were doing the week before.
Oh, gotcha. I apologize.
I mean, I'm just asking, is that true or not true?
No, it was weird. Like it was just this weird feeling of like, now what? Like and it kind of lasted for like a couple months, to be honest, because we tried to come together and work on this Gantt chart of things, and I'm trying to like answer questions because again, like having 45 employees, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of things happening. So I kind of went into like, look, I mean, I'm a transparent leader. I always have been. So I spent a lot of time just like nurturing the team, having conversations with the team, keeping people calm. But again, like when it happened and we signed the deal, like fireworks didn't go off. Like, I hate to say it, like, it was another day. And it was just like, this is part of that strategic plan. My partner and I, we met up, we had drinks, and, it was a great conversation because we've been great partners. And not to say we haven't had our challenges, but it was great to hang out one to one and say, man, we fucking did it. Like,
Yeah.
it's been a good 11-year run. And I said, look, you've been a great partner. And who knows what life looks like in the future. But like we can look back in our life and say, we had a great 11-year partnership. We may go on and do something in the future. We may go on and run HLM for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, and again, this is like right after the deal. So it was kind of good to be like, he's happy, I'm happy, we're having drinks. And it's like, that felt really good.
And
So
there's a certain validation that comes from somebody intelligent that has a checkbook that agrees with you that you've created something of value in the world
yeah,
for people, for customers, for employees.
yeah.
And so then tell me about the kind of what you're doing now, what the biggest differences have been, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the biggest difference for me, like if you fast forward today to like deal close, it's just, look, we're 108 employees today. We'll finish the year out at 21 million in revenue, which when we closed the deal, the goal was 18 million. So we're
Wow.
going to do 3 million above that. So as you can imagine, everybody's really happy. Like when money's coming in, everybody's really happy. So I think the biggest challenge for me personally is the idea around be careful what you wish for because you might get it. Which is, I was the CEO, now I'm not. I'm not sitting here pining and saying I wish I was. I mean, this is all by design. But sometimes I feel it's a mental game of, what's that game where like little kids are like doing the jump rope and people are trying to jump in. Like sometimes I jump in and the rope hits me in the face and I'm like, I'm just trying to figure out how do I embrace my new life in this organization and provide the most value? Because my time to whomever, myself, is very valuable. And if I'm going to invest my time, I want to make sure it's at the highest, best level possible. And I will say that's been a struggle. I will say it's probably 90% made up in my head in terms of, now I have new partners and there's a lot more people. There's a lot of people in the organization. I hate to say this, but I'm going to like, I don't know their name. I mean, we're hiring and people are leaving at a fast clip and it's a different level, being a 40 some person company to a 100+ organization is very different. And it's taken some time to get adjusted to it. So for me, it's just been clear communication with my partners to understand, the prioritization of what we're doing and how we all kind of backfill that yeah, it's been.
And like just about everybody I work with, there's always certain concerns that you have as you're going to close, right? What's going to happen when we close? What are employees going to think? Oh my God, we're going to lose employees. What happens if
Mhm.
that happens? Blah, blah, blah. So what's happened let's take it a couple of things. Number one is employees. What was the employee reaction? Would you have communicated it differently? And have you lost a bunch of people?
Yeah, so I've implemented this thing in my organization called EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. So every Monday, every department has this hour and a half meeting. So literally, we're closing the deal Friday. That Monday, again, like we had to keep this on lock before because news travels fast. And I want to make sure people heard it from me. So Monday, I went in every single department level 10, and I let everybody know what was going on. And I had a lot of anxiety going into that, right? Because it's just I don't know. It was hard. It was different. And the crazy thing about it that I remember is the people that I thought that were going to give me pushback didn't. And like the opposite, the ones that I thought wouldn't care pushed back. It was
And
like polar
what
opposites.
what was the miscalculation there on your part?
Some people looked at me, and again, this is all on Zoom because this is in the heat of COVID and people are still scared to face to face. So um, it was some people were like, "Yeah, I knew this was going to happen at some point. Great, like I see the opportunity." Because again, the reason why I did this wasn't selfishly so my partner and I could just get all this sum of money and sip margaritas. It was a strategic 360 view of what high level marketing is. High level marketing became a lot more than me and my partner John, where I felt like this could create opportunities for the employees to really accelerate in their career. Before HLM North, like we struggled with the right type of like management training and just people were always like, look, what's next or what can I do? And I'm kind of like, I don't know,
Yeah,
like you're kind of looking at it, right? Like do a better job or do more. Like, so this was a really good opportunity for people to really expand and kind of get to that next level. So as I'm having this discussion, like some people really saw that or like that, this is great, like shared resources, more people, like scale. And some people were like, I can't believe you. Like, why would you do this? This is your baby. But it was just interesting how people I had this, assumption were going to react one way, they didn't. So,
Do those
you know,
people fit into buckets? Meaning, guys typically think my A players, B players, C players, right on the team. Were the people that were most excited about it, were they more the A players, or was it really across the board?
it was across the board. Because I felt like I had, I knew everybody at our organization at 40 some odd individuals. Like it was still I had that ability to kind of connect with people. Yeah, it was really interesting. So like fast forward to today, I ran the numbers the other day, and we're down from those individuals at 100%. We've lost 40% of HLM North members. And it's not all because, they were like, this isn't for us. I mean, obviously, you hear the big resonance and all these things and outside factors. We still don't have an office with COVID. Being on Zoom, people not having relationships, people being headhunted every day. I mean, there's a lot of factors that
Yeah.
went into this. But I will say, and I'm not going to sit here and lie, like culture's different. As much as I thought the cultures would be the same, I kind of forced it. And I'm a very different guy than Scott. Not bad, different. It's just different. And I think as an employee, when you're not in control and things are happening, a lot of people were thinking like, well, why wasn't I brought in or my feedback? And it's just this happened to them regardless of if they wanted it or not. And I just try to make it as comfortable for them to help them see the new vision. And I think the A players, the real A players, I mean, I've seen some of our people really step up, you know.
So let me ask this, because this is great. I appreciate you sharing this because it comes up all the time. So if we were a week before close, and I said to you, Wes, when this deal closes over the next quarter, you're going to lose 40% of your team, and you're going to outperform your budget by 20% in just 9 months. What would your emotions have been about that?
I I'd probably be even more fired up. Like, I knew it was gonna happen to a certain degree, and I also felt like we needed a shakeup, good, bad, or indifferent, and I felt very, like I felt good and relieved because I felt this is the best vision for the organization, and I'm creating this opportunity. If somebody doesn't see that opportunity, maybe now is the time for them to jump off the ship, because it's such an easy thing to say, I don't like the New World Order, I'm going to go over here. It makes it easy for them to leave the organization versus before it might have been very hard for them, or it might have been, so in the back of my mind, I had the expectation it was going to happen. But out of that, like, now we came together as one unit, and now we have, we're hiring people in the organization with the new vision, which is pretty awesome, because now when we hire somebody, we're 10 months down the road. I meet everybody and I share the story of how it came together. But like, everybody we're hiring now, it's already 10 months past, and it's not this new thing. So
Right.
it's been refreshing.
So, the most of the guys and women that listen to this podcast are running companies that are, 40 to 120 ish employees, maybe 150 employees. What would you say to them about, I'm concerned about my employees' reaction?
Mhm.
And number two, is there any advice you would give about when you tell a broader circle of people?
Yeah, like, don't lie about it. Like, be authentic and like really think it through. I mean, again, I think I did a good job. I think that was always been my strength, of like looking at it from other people's perspective and being open, willing, and ready to share honest feedback. So again, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to take this money off the table and this is what we're doing from this angle. It was like, you have to be considerate and look at the employee side. And that was probably the hardest thing to sell to the organization was, and it's the honest to God's truth, like, part of this deal was for them. Like, I was kind of waving the flag. I'm like, little did people know, like, I don't have this clear career track for you. And there's like things that we're suffering from, and it's not going to get better. Like, what people thought was great and things are going amazing. I'm sitting there like, things aren't amazing. Things are kind of shitty, you know? So, you know, I, uh, I think looking at it from their perspective is really important, because it's scary, right? I mean, if you're going into an organization for 3 years, you feel you have a close relationship with leadership, or you really know the organization, then all of a sudden that's ripped off. Like, employees just went through COVID. They're going through God knows what behind closed doors. And then all of a sudden the CEO and the entrepreneur comes up and says, oh, guess what? Now we're doing this. That's terrifying.
So,
Like,
how worried should a fellow CEO be about the impact of employees' reaction post close?
in hindsight, right, going back 10 months, the right people are still with us today. So I think that turbulence is scary when you're going through it, but like, the destination is right there.
Yeah.
And again, like, you hear people are leaving and then all these other people leave, and it's really scary while you're experiencing like a lot of other things in life, like this too shall pass. um I wouldn't let it hang me up. And I think that if you're behind a great organization and there's a great opportunity on the table, like, I think that, in hindsight, is I wouldn't even stress out about it at all.
As much as you did. So then, so it feels like from what you're sharing, and mostly from the numbers, right? You've outperformed your revenue goals percent in the first year.
Yep.
Two-part question. One, why do you think what caused the outperformance? Is it just a rising tide all along? Is it the ability for cross sell? Number one. Number two, what has been the most important thing in the first 10 months that's helped you get traction, kind of blending these two organizations together?
So I think going back to like what was really attracted to me, which was the sales onboarding that we discussed earlier. And for me, what that's really about is, so I live in the world of web and digital marketing. So as a sales individual and you're out there in the world, and let's say you're talking to a plumbing company in your area, how in the hell, as a salesperson, do you know any outcome of what's going to happen for that service-based company? Like, you could sit there and say, look, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but there's no way to quantify the amount of value and leads that that customer is going to get. It's impossible. They can pull rabbits out of a hat, they can make assumptions. We've built technology that can predict and with laser pinpoint accuracy know what it's going to cost, et cetera, et cetera. So part of what the coming together with Bell, they kind of took it a step further, where they actually have an onboarding team. So not only does our technology piggyback on that, you have a team of individuals that are really ripping it apart, coming back to the customer with very well thought out proposals, which it sounds simple, like just saying it sounds super simple, but in the world of digital, like these can take a day for a team to do. But just to keep things simple, somebody that we might have sold a website to for say $10,000, going through this process creates three solid different avenues the customer can go through, giving the salesperson a lot of confidence that the lowest one's probably 20,000, then 40,000 and 80,000.
Yeah.
And while we were doing this deal, and that was my biggest gripe, I'm like, we are leaving at HLM North so much money on the table. I felt it in my DNA. Like in this process, I'm like, my sales team is going to go haywire with this because they are the best. And if we can really create more value and sell customers for more revenue and kind of right the ship, and that's exactly what happened. A lot of other contributing factors. So my customer service team, when we came together with their team, they were very focused on upselling, cross-selling, and it kind of helped take our team to the next level. So a lot of those factors, I mean, I think while we were going through, we weren't even signed yet on the deal. One of my sales individuals submitted a deal to us, and I think our team came back and said it's like $10,000 or something crazy. And I said, Scott, I said, I'm going to throw you a deal. Like, let's just figure out. I was like, I don't even care. Like, this deal's going through, and we can figure it out later. We ended up selling that deal for $85,000. We would
Wow.
have taken that deal at old HLM North for like 10 to 15,000. And that right there, when I was going through it, I'm like, this is why I'm doing this, because I live in the twilight zone, and for me to architect and build that model at HLM North,
Yeah, it wouldn't happen. That's great.
no,
So now let me ask you this, moving through the deal. So, we got the transaction done, obviously, but we negotiated your employment agreement. We
yeah,
went through due diligence. We negotiated the working capital, how much was in equity, what
mhm,
happens if you leave, what happens if you get fired, all that kind of stuff.
yep.
Was that more complex than you thought it was? And what was the most surprising of that whole process?
Yeah, it was emotional, right? And again, I think I'm a visionary, I'm an emotional kind of guy. So looking at everything that would come to the table, and look, I think you have to come into this in a deal and you're not going to get everything. Like there's give and take. And especially walking into a new relationship. Like I'm looking at this as I'm going to partner with these guys. Like it's got to be fair and balanced. And I mean, there were some things that I think I was non-negotiable on, but there was others like I quite frankly like didn't care. What was really important to me was, yeah, the employment agreement, right? Which was, hey, if I'm going to do this deal, I want to get locked up for 2 years. Like I want a guarantee. And some pressure around me was like, well, why do you need a contract and this, that, and the other? And this is how deals go. And I'm like, look, if LeBron James is going to go to the Lakers for 2 years, like he wants a contract. He's not going to be a free agent, right? And that's kind of what I stuck to, and, like, that was a non-negotiable. The other things, the working capital, like, that kinda came out of that was a lot more than I anticipated, and that was kind of a gut punch. I really didn't realize the amount of working capital, but I'll tell you, it got to the point where, like, we were so far bottom of the ninth, and a lot of this stuff is, "Am I gonna blow this deal up for this or get tick for tack?" So it's kinda like looking at individual items, be like, "Okay, I feel like a little bit burnt on this one, but what does this look like?" That's where I was like, 2-year employment agreement. Like in the deal I did was the same deal I did for my partner. The accounting stuff, perception. I think I told you at one point, I said, Todd, I was like, I think you must be like a master fisherman because in my mind the whole time, it's like, you have a whale on the line, but you got to know when to let that drag out and give it some space. So, I mean, this was an emotional process, one that I went from a couple days to being super excited to the next day, like, I'm not doing this deal. And if I have to talk to Todd Tasky again or Scott Belt, like, I'm going to flip over some tables, And I think that, Todd, you did a magnificent job of kind of managing my chaos and just look, it's an emotional thing. And in hindsight is, you know, I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. I've talked to a lot of people that have been through the process, but ultimately it was my thing, my decision. I had to do what's right for me. So you got to be careful with outside people
Yeah.
because they're going to talk about it from their perspective and their experience, which gets in your mind. It's hard. And
So I'll try to bring us now towards the end because this has been super. So there's a lot of talk, I think, in wisdom and advice about, when you do a deal and you have an earnout or you have a second bite or you roll over equity, that kind of stuff, you're going to get it, you're going to not get it, whatever.
Mhm.
Having gone through it now and having several months, almost a year to kind of reflect on it, is there anything that you would share as, keep these one or two points in mind as you go through a transaction so that it turns out to be as successful as you hope as the entrepreneur?
Yeah, like over communicate. And again, in my circumstance, I have new partners, and we're continuing to go down the path. I'm an executive in the organization, and we're going to continue to grow and scale the organization. So vet everything out, ask dumb questions. That's one thing I would say. Like, throw your ego out the side. Because if just ask. And I would also say, Todd, you referred a phenomenal attorney. He was critical in this process.
That's
And I'll be honest,
David Schwinger.
yeah, David Schwimmer, when I first met him, like, this guy's a little old. What does he know about digital marketing? He's a nice guy. This guy was a freaking bulldog that, honestly, I mean, he's so memorable. I think I've kicked him a couple referral. Like, he was just amazing. And, I think just be very clear and whole with what you want, and make that clear to the people in the room. Because if you're holding things back, you're not like, for me, I think that's how, like, you can kind of live with clean hands, and like
Well,
that's what makes me feel whole and feel good.
yeah, I'll also say this because it was very helpful, your style for me, because I knew what you wanted. You don't hold back, so I know your style, which I appreciate. Sometimes guys will hold me at arm's length and they'll tell me this, thinking I'll tell the buyer that for whatever reason.
Yeah,
So I think that is a good piece of advice. Number one. Number two, David Schwinger, who we used and I've used a few times, is a great lawyer. There's lots of great M&A lawyers. I just suffered through a deal where a guy had to use his guy, client of mine had to use his guy. And yes, I've done transactions in the past. That's not the guy you want. You want a guy that only does M&A
hmm
because David's done it 100 times. Their lawyers have done it 100 times. So you get into this cadence of this would get when you get a guy that says, "No, I don't think we should have working capital. I don't think you should have accounts receivable." Whatever the nonsense is, that's a great piece of advice. Having a really good lawyer, and so I would say that, and then I would end with this question because I end all my episodes like this. You have been very successful in your business. You've been also successful in your life, right? You've got a great family and a marriage, and all those things that are super important. Is there anything that you referenced a couple, but is there anything that you would point to that's had a lasting impact on your success and kind of what's gotten you to where we are now?
for sure. So I think just, I mentioned EO early on. As soon as I was able to do over 1 million in revenue, like that changed my life, getting involved in that organization. The second thing, probably the most critical, was out of EO. There's this methodology called EOS. It's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, authored by a guy named Gino Wickman, who's actually in my area. This was designed for entrepreneurs. And, entrepreneurs are crazy. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm not a process guy. I tell people, I have kids, so I've watched all these Disney movies. I'm like Wreck-It Ralph. Like, I'm not following the process. I'm going by the beat of my own drum. I hire people that implement and develop process, and I still won't follow it. But I think that EOS created clarity in my life because it was I was finally able to say, I know what the diagnosis is for my crazy. I'm a visionary. And this book helps visionaries structure companies. And the biggest take out of this is just it's simple, which I like. I don't like super complicated things. And I'll never forget out of that book, it says, at some point you have to move from an entrepreneurial ran company to a professionally managed company. So as I'm struggling to grow the organization for the last like 2, 3 years, that was in the front of my head. And hooking up and doing this deal with these guys, I'm like, these are the professionally managed guys I can partner with. Look, high level market, we'll be $100+ million company. Like,
It's super interesting because some guys say, "Oh shit, here's the road I have to travel down now," and there's other guys, you being one of them, that says, "I'm not. I don't want to be the CEO, head of product. I want to be the chief revenue officer. I want to be CMO, whatever it's going to be." Right. So that, I think, wherever you get that clarity from is great.
Yeah.
Can I also ask, because you mentioned Grant Cardone 10X?
Yeah.
What was that?
He's just a motivational guy. He's a big real estate tycoon. So he's got a lot of books out there. Just a very inspirational, motivational guy that does a lot of deals, But going back, the one point I don't want to miss is I've used this analogy with a lot of people and they get it. It's, I don't know if you're a boxing fan or listeners are boxing fans, but think about like Oscar De La Hoya. Like, I feel with HLM, like, you only have so much time as an NFL player or boxer. And now what does Oscar De La Hoya do? Like, he kicked the shit out of people in the ring, but what did he have behind him? The best team. So now Oscar De La Hoya is behind the best fighters and he's one of the best promoters. And I kind of looked at HLM like, man, I'm not that guy any longer, but I can be a really good supporting structure to Scott. So what I've told people for Scott is like, look, were you ever in middle school or high school and somebody wanted to kick your ass and say, meet me at the tree at 4:00 and I'm going to beat you up? Now I'm going to come along with you and I'm going to help you kick their ass. So my goal was, if I can come in this organization, support Scott Bell as CEO, as another set of eyes and ears and C-level, and we can help grow this thing together. That excited me more than being the CEO of the organization, because I know I can add more value and we can get to where we want to go faster.
That's great. And for anybody listening to this podcast, I would encourage you, you can go and just search at Second Bite Podcast for Scott Bell's interview, which is from a few months ago. And you can hear the other side of the story, and you can see two different personalities that have come together to create a great business, which HLM is and will be. And here's with pride, I keep this one right on the desktop. So Wes, it's always generous when somebody will share as much as you have today about the transaction, about our fears, about our all those things, because we all share them, right? And so I'll say thanks to you. It's a great episode. I'll say thanks again to the people at Trivest, because they're a great sponsor and a great private equity group if you want to check them. And this has been a great episode, just like I thought it would be, Scott. So Matt, Wes. So thanks for being with us.
I appreciate it, Todd. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.